Hello, we are Pat and Summer, and this is our interactive graph by others presentation.
The interactive graph we reviewed is from the Guardian newspaper and was called The Past, Present, and Future of CO2. The graph allows the reader to interact with it in a number of ways to further understand the data. There is a narrated animation and an unnarrated loop. The graph runs from 1860 to 2011 and shows the top 20 carbon emitters for each year. The graph was published ahead of the UN climate talks in 2014. These talks were intended to limit the increase of global temperatures to no more than 2 degrees Celsius. To do this, scientists estimated that we need to cap the total amount of our cumulative annual carbon emissions to be 3 million tons. This is our carbon budget. I'll jump to 2011 to show the carbon emissions for the final year. We believe that this graph illustrates a number of the principles in yeast taxonomy, particularly explore, reconfigure, and abstract, elaborate. The graph doesn't allow you to select, encode, filter, or connect the data.
The main interaction for this graph is the slider that allows the reader to select a year. As the slider moves, the graph changes and reorders to display data for the selected year. This is an example of both explore and reconfigure. One could argue that this interaction is also an example of filter because the slider is a dynamic query control. However, there is no way to bring back the unfiltered data or reset the data, so we did not think it was a true filter. The reader can also toggle between emissions and continent. This is an example of reconfigure. There is also a tooltip that appears when you hover over a country. This is considered details on demand and is an example of abstract elaborate.
The reader can also click on the budget toggle at the top of the chart. This displays an area chart that shows the percentage of the overall carbon budget reached by that year and how it breaks down by continent. I'll fast forward to a couple of years. Here's 1910, 1958, all the way up to 2011. The reader can also hover over each of the individual sections to display additional details about the emissions. This is an example of explore and abstract elaborate. Finally, the reader can project carbon emissions into the future by clicking on the future toggle. This displays two different options. The first shows when we will reach our budget if we continue our current consumption of fossil fuels. The second shows when we will reach our budget if we switch to a more transformative change plan, which eventually will lead to a reversal in the amount of carbon emissions. This is an example of explore. Thank you for your time. We hope you agree that this graph provides an interesting way for readers to interact and engage with the graph to better understand carbon emissions over time and into the future.